To order. Welcome, Minister and Deputy. Pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, we're doing a study on the Canada Pension Plan Agreement, and the Minister will be on for the first hour, and then we will talk to Deputy, and then Department of Finance officials will be here for the next hour. Minister, the floor is yours. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to be here to talk to you about our historic agreement to strengthen Canada's pension plan. An agreement that will not only help Canadians save more for retirement, but will also help grow the economy long term. As my colleagues know, ensuring retirement security was a key part of the fundamental promise we made Canadians a year ago. A promise to help the middle class and those working hard to join it.
Help Canadians reach their dream of a secure retirement. Not only did we keep that promise, but I couldn't be more proud of the way in which we did it. When my Finance Minister colleagues and I first started these talks last December, I felt that we had a real opportunity to seize on a renewed spirit of collaboration to get things done. This is, after all, one of the reasons why I chose public life. As we met for the first time, just up the street from here at the Finance Building, there were different views around the table, to be sure, but there was an undeniable feeling that everyone came to the table with the best interests of the people that we serve at heart. It was that spirit of collaboration that won the day in Vancouver this past June. I'd like to think it was federalism at its best. Of course, the House had risen for the summer when we concluded that deal. And so it gives me great pleasure today to be here on the very first day that we're back together to tell you more about our plan to strengthen the Canada Pension Plan and to answer any questions that you might have. The officials here today have agreed to stay an extra hour to walk through any details that you might want to talk about. I want to say that I appreciate their work and their detailed analysis, which has guided us throughout this entire process. Part of that analysis was first answering what we saw as a critically important question. Do we need a stronger Canada Pension Plan? And our view is the answer is unequivocally yes. Here's why. We know that middle-class Canadians are working harder than ever, and many are worried that they won't have enough set aside for their eventual retirement. That feeling's palpable as we all knocked on doors, held town halls, and talked to people as part of our work. We also know that young Canadians in particular are facing the challenge of securing adequate retirement savings at a time when fewer can expect to work in jobs that will include a workplace pension plan. In my former line of work, I talked to students who invariably didn't place much importance on a solid pension plan when they were looking for their first job. It's either not on their radar screen or it's no longer a reasonable expectation that they hold. But I can tell you that that perception changes over time. That's why achieving a safe, secure, and dignified retirement is, without a doubt, among the most significant long-term goals for hardworking Canadians. Our analysis shows that 1/4 of families nearing retirement, 1.1 million Canadian families, are currently facing a drop in their standard of living when they retire. Une famille sur quatre qui approche
1/4 of families approaching retirement age, 1.1 million families, face a significant drop in their standard of living when they retire.
Canadians want a stronger Canada Pension Plan. A June independent, self-commissioned poll by Angus Reid Institute found that 3/4 of Canadians support an expansion of the Canada Pension Plan. So we, as a government, have set out to help hardworking Canadians. Helping them achieve a secure retirement is one of our very highest priorities. So that's why. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we intend on doing this. The agreed-upon Canada Pension Plan enhancement will not only mean more money for Canadians when they retire, it will also mean a stronger economy and more middle-class jobs. To fund these enhanced benefits, annual CPP contributions will increase modestly over 7 years, starting in 2019. Pour financer ces prestations,
to fund the enhancement, annual CPP contributions will increase modestly over 7 years, starting in 2019. For most, it will represent about a 1 percentage point increase in contributions. These will be phased in gradually. For example, someone who earns about $55,000 a year will contribute about $6 a month more in 2019. By the end of the progressive phase-in period, contributions would be about $43 per month more, which represents about $20 per paycheck. This small increase in contributions would provide a significant increase in retirement income. That means that this worker would receive about $17,500 a year, which is about $4,400 more. Our government is ensuring as smooth a transition as possible by providing tax deductibility for new employee contributions. That means that tax savings to Canadians will total $710 million. We are also providing more help for low-income workers through the Working Income Tax Benefit. This represents an investment of $260 million. Taken together, these measures will account for $970 million in federal fiscal support in 2021 to 2022.
will be partially offset over the long term by an increase in tax revenue due to increased Canada Pension Plan benefits. But the real impact of a stronger Canada Pension Plan will be felt over the long term. That's because Canadian retirees will have more money to spend on their needs, like healthy food, transportation, and housing costs, which will lead to greater confidence, more jobs, and create the conditions for overall economic growth in Canada. As you may know, once fully in place, the CPP enhancement will increase the maximum Canada Pension Plan retirement benefit by about 50%. The current maximum benefit is $13,110. In 2016 terms, the enhanced CPP represents an increase of nearly $7,000 to a maximum benefit of nearly $20,000. Young Canadians just entering the workforce and who are facing the greatest challenge going forward will see the largest increase in benefits. And here's how it'll work. Right now, the CPP replaces only a quarter of Canadians' average annual earnings upon retirement. That means if you're, say, a welder making $55,000 or $50,000 per year over your working life, you'll get a quarter of that per year over your retirement, or in the case of that $50,000 a year worker, about $12,000. There's also currently a limit of about $55,000 at which this quarter share maxes out. So if you make more than $55,000 a year, you'll still get only a quarter of $55,000. The enhancement that Canada's governments have agreed to does two things that will see Canadians receive more through the CPP in retirement. First, it will increase the share of your annual earnings that you'll get in retirement from 1/4 to 1/3. So if you're like our welder friend making $50,000 a year over your working life, you'll receive about $16,000 per year in retirement instead of today's $12,000. Second, it'll increase the point at which this new 1/3 replacement rate maxes out by about 14%, which is projected to be equal to $82,700 in 2025. So if you're, say, a commercial pilot making $80,000 per year over your working life, you'll get 1/3 of that per year in retirement from the CPP. This means that you'll get 50% more benefits from the CPP in your pocket every year for the rest of your life. It means for Canadians more time with their grandkids and less time worrying about the rent. It means buying healthier food, getting out more, maybe joining a gym. It means more jobs and economic activity all around us. And we think that that's a good thing. So before I take your questions, I want to tell you a bit more about what I want to accomplish as Finance Minister. When I look at Canada's future, I see promise, I see opportunity, I see growth. But when I look around me, I see too many Canadians are worried and are struggling to make ends meet. I mentioned earlier that 1.1 million families approaching retirement can't be sure that they can retire in dignity. It's clear from this statistic alone that creating economic growth won't be enough if it's concentrated in the hands of the few. That's now commonly understood around the world, not least around the G20 table where I was just a little while ago. In many respects, our government was ahead of the curve. Au cours de notre première année, nous avons...
In our first year, we cut taxes for 9 million Canadians, introduced the Canada Child Benefit, increased student grants, increased monthly payments for the most vulnerable seniors. We've also begun making unprecedented investments to strengthen the heart of the Canadian economy. These investments will help the middle class grow and prosper today, while delivering economic growth for years to come. The agreement in principle we struck with the provinces is part of this broader goal.
This agreement, and I'm grateful that my provincial colleagues and so many of us across all parties share this view. We're investing in a brighter future for our children and our grandchildren. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. Merci de votre attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, that might come from the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and we will go to 5 minutes rounds rather than normal 7. I think that way we can get everybody on. Everybody will have the opportunity to ask a question. Mr. McKinnon first.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. First of all, on behalf of my colleagues on this side, I would like to congratulate you for your accomplishment, which was to unite the provinces and to ensure that we have a national agreement, including additions to Quebec's pension plan, which we should see over the next few months, but a national announcement that will ensure that this problem that we see due to lack of savings and fewer registered retirement plans will be compensated by strengthening Canada's pension plan. Could you describe the process a bit? How did you, in collaboration with your provincial colleagues and colleagues in the territories, manage to conclude this agreement in such a short time?
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much.
Vous savez, la question...
As you know, the matter of retirement in Canada is a matter that has been raised over several years. We have a problem when we consider how to improve the situation for all Canadians. We know that retirement programs offered by corporations are less prevalent than they used to be. That's one of the reasons that we started our campaign a year ago to tell Canadians that it was necessary to strengthen the Canada Pension Plan. In December, when I started discussing this with my provincial colleagues to determine how we could improve the situation, it was a good discussion. It was an open discussion. Everyone understood that it was necessary to find a way to improve the situation. After a few months, after some important analyses were conducted by people in our department and throughout the country in the provinces, we concluded that it was necessary to find a way, and together with the provinces, we decided that it was necessary to significantly increase it for the future, but to make a gradual change. That was important for us, but of course for the provinces as well, to be sure that small and medium businesses would have a way of implementing it without making a dramatic change. But this would still be something that would help people in the future. It wasn't easy, but it was important, and I'm very proud that we found a way to go about it.
J'anticipe que nos
I would expect that our colleagues on the other side of the table will talk about tax increases. I would note that when the Canada Pension Plan was put together in the 60s, according to their logic, we never would have seen a CPP, or in the 90s, when the former minister, Mr. Martin, your predecessor, decided to strengthen the Canada Pension Plan. I was relieved and even pleasantly surprised to see the negligible impact on growth and employment in the short term, and the positive impact that it would have, that this enhancement would have over the medium and long term. Could you perhaps talk about those impacts, as you did in your opening remarks? Could you talk about the economic impact, the impact on growth in medium and long term?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, of course. This is a very important issue. We know that with a pension system that is difficult for many Canadians, there's not enough confidence in the future for families, for Canadians who don't have enough to retire in dignity. They don't have a level of security that is good for the economy. It's necessary to have a certain amount of trust in the future in order to ensure a good economic situation. We know that in the long term, it's necessary to have a good retirement system. And it's necessary for people to have a level of confidence. We are very proud that we found a way to do it that will be good for the economy and at the same time help people and help families in the future. I am entirely confident that our economy will win, that more good jobs will be available in the future, that growth will increase in the future, and at the same time, we can improve our pension plan system, which will help people to retire in dignity.
Mr. Minister, Ms. Raitt.
Thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate it. As you can probably guess, I'm going to ask you some questions about the book that you wrote in 2012 called The Real Retirement, because it became a touchstone in terms of understanding what we face in future regarding retirement for Canadians. And I would submit to you, Minister, that there is a big difference between what you wrote in 2012 and what you're telling us here today. Now, you gave us 4 reasons why it was necessary to make these changes to CPP. One of them was that there was a feeling in the country that people hadn't set aside enough money, that young people were not saving. A quarter of Canadians face significant drop in their lifestyle. In an Angus Reid poll, I want to start with the Angus Reid poll, Mr. Minister, just to point out that in that poll, it is indicated to their polling results that the general public was not paying close attention to the process. Fully 1 in 3 say they haven't seen or heard anything about CPP expansion. This was around the time when you said this was the motivation, and again, why you think that you have the approval of the Canadian public to do this. While roughly the same number, 35%, report that they're following the news coverage or chatting with friends about it. This is what Angus Reid said about those numbers. This latter total is significantly lower than most issues about which Angus Reid Institute asked this question. So clearly, Minister, the reality is that Canadians certainly didn't understand what you were proposing as motivation for the changes to CPP. Minister, you said in the Real Retirement a couple of things. When asked about the Ontario Liberal Party suggestion of expanding CPP, your quote was, "We would be putting too many eggs in one basket." You commended the former Harper government for increasing and putting in place the TFSA. You said on retirement age that if we were to retire 3 years later than we do now, any concerns about having adequate retirement income would practically vanish. It would also alleviate any shortages in the workforce due to the aging population. And finally, you also indicated as well, Minister, in your book that the Dickensian image of poverty is virtually non-existent in Canada today. So, Minister, if your feeling in 2012 and your expert advice in 2012-13 was that people will have enough to be set aside, that TFSAs were a good way for young people to save, that the Angus Reid Institute actually doesn't say what you contend, that the Canadian population does believe that this is a good thing because, frankly, they don't know about it. And finally, that 1/4 of Canadian families face a significant drop in lifestyle. Minister, I would say that when you already said that there was not anything in terms of the concerns about having retirement income would practically vanish if we retired 3 years earlier, I guess, why did you roll back the amount that we can put into our TFSAs? Why did you change retirement age? And why did you do CPP expansion when it's completely counterintuitive to everything you wrote as the plan for us to be able to be self-sufficient and indeed prosperous going into the future?
Thank you. That was a long question.
Yep. I expected a long answer, Minister, to be honest, so I thought I'd get it all in.
Well, first of all, I think that I owe you a note of thanks. I think that you were part of the team that decided we should be talking about this today. And I want to say that I couldn't be more happy to be talking about how we are expanding the Canada Pension Plan for Canadians on this, our very first day back in the House this fall. We made a promise to Canadians that we would work to enhance the Canada Pension Plan. We made a promise to Canadians that we would work in collaboration with the provinces to come to a solution that could make a real and measurable difference in their lives over the long term, so that we could help them to retire in dignity. And we were so pleased to be able to work together with the provinces to get to an answer that could really do something over the long term that we know needed to be done. I'll take you back to some of the key issues and challenges here. There are a significant number of Canadians, 1.1 million Canadian families, that are not saving enough right now to have the same level of income or same standard of living when they retire as they have today. This is just a challenge that we face as a nation. We know that the system that we've put in place over the last 2 generations, the system where workplace pensions would help many, many Canadians, is no longer functioning in the way that it has historically. More and more organizations are winding up defined benefit plans, and fewer Canadians are actually in those programs. So there's a real challenge facing Canadian families, and we knew that the way to solve this is to figure out how we can enhance the Canada Pension Plan, the most effective saving vehicle that Canadians can have, in a way that would be not only helping the economy over the long term, but ensuring that they have a way to save that puts them in a much stronger position. So the agreement that we've come to will actually improve 1/4 of those Canadians that are facing that challenging situation. And it'll do so in a way that will enable the economy to grow and us to create jobs along the way. We believe that it's absolutely one of the key cornerstones of what we've done so far in our work for Canadians, and we're very proud to be moving forward this fall and putting it into legislation.
Thank you, Minister.
Sorry, between you both, you ran the clock out of time. Mr. Duval.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Minister, for coming today. I really appreciate it. Give us an update where there's many concerns across Canada of how this plan will be implemented going into the future. We've heard a lot of rumors, but now you're here today to try to put some of those rumors to bed. But as you know, 7 out of 10 working Canadians have no workplace pension. So we see the value of doing something for enhancement, especially with the Canada Pension Plan. But I look at what is being proposed here, certainly does not go far enough. And I tell you the reason why is, under this plan, you would have to be the age of about 16 years to get the maximum benefits at the maximum time when they go to retire. So because it's not going to start to 2025 when you fully do it, you'd have to work about 40 years and to get the maximum benefit. And the problem with the maximum benefit is we're talking those maximum costs and income. But many people on the average do not get the maximum benefit even now. The average is about $684 that the people are getting. So we keep talking about the $16,000 when that's not even coming close to it. And the reason for that is many factories have closed down, pensions have wound up, layoffs have occurred, and then the people have nothing else to go to but precarious jobs or part-time jobs, which pays little in premiums to get any kind of a benefit to the maximum. So I guess my question to you is, going that this is maybe a great thing for our grandchildren and our children that are starting out to work, we need to know what is going to happen to the people that are near retirement now, that have faced those problems. Where's the benefit for them, and how will this increase? Because there's a lot of, in Hamilton, it has hit us dearly, especially with the manufacturing jobs breakdown and the amount of jobs that are out there where people are now making a third to half their wage. But also, many people think out there that I've been listening to, going to the doors in Hamilton, is they think that the way this has been promoted, that there's an increase coming for them under the Canada Pension Plan, they're already retired. So I'm not sure where the information of that is coming from, but how are we going to do that? And we need a clear breakdown from the government on who will benefit the most, who will benefit the least, and how these changes will interact with other programs, and how we will strengthen the workplace pension plans. If I can start from there.
Thank you. I think it's important to address the challenges that you're presenting. It's certainly the case that many Canadians are finding themselves in challenging situations, both during the course of their working lives and as they face the prospect of retirement. Our approach has been to, first and foremost, work to improve the situation of middle-class Canadians and those trying to get into the middle class by taking some really important first steps. Reducing taxes for 9 million middle-class Canadians we see as an important step in putting more money in people's pockets. The enhancement of the way we deal with child benefits helps many, many families, 9 out of 10 families with children, with the new Canada Child Benefit. So we've taken some important steps during people's working lives. We also recognize that there continue to be Canadians who are retired, who are living in very difficult situation. While we've made progress over the last couple of generations in reducing the number of impoverished seniors, we still have people who are living in difficult situations. So our decision to increase the guaranteed income supplement top-up helps hundreds of thousands of seniors living in difficult situations with up to $947 per year additional. The decision to move the old age security age from 67 to where it had been at 65 helps in particular those Canadians that are earning under the cutoff point at which OAS is clawed back, so helps Canadians in a more vulnerable situation. With respect to the CPP enhancement, we do recognize that this is something about the future, that we are trying to ensure that our retirement system stays one of the most respected systems on the globe by ensuring that it remains fully funded. So this enhancement that we've negotiated with the provinces will be fully funded. It will allow for no intergenerational transfers from one generation to the other by having the people that are going to get the benefit be the ones that put the money into it. Anybody who does put money into it, they will get some return from it. But you correctly pointed out that the maximum return will be for those people who lead their entire career. Our view is that we need to work on the short term by improving people's lives, on the longer term by making investments in the economy, investments in infrastructure, investments in creating more innovative and productive economy, and try and help people to ensure that they save appropriately so they can have a secure and dignified retirement, which is what this is intended to do.
Very much. Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Minister, for being here today. I actually want to continue on the line of questioning and the thought that we just finished up on. I think we've all heard those stories in our constituencies of seniors choosing between medication or food and how heartbreaking it is, and you already mentioned the GIS top-up. And I see this as, you know, a vision towards the future, so that we don't get into a situation of future generations of seniors also then needing a GIS top-up or going into a situation where they're struggling, because we're looking to the future and we're seeing where there are gaps and there are holes. And I look at my own generation and my friends and entering the workforce seriously now and what retirement means. And you're right in your opening comments. I don't think, well, we're not thinking about retirement. We're not thinking about that long-term planning. And if you don't have an employer that's kind of doing that for you with a pension plan, it's not top of mind. And you and I both coming from Ontario, where this was certainly a significant issue for the provincial election, but also the issue of housing in certain regions, and that a lot of people, you know, I look at future generations not having the same housing opportunities that maybe my parents had, for example. So can you speak a little bit in terms of how this works in Ontario, given that the provincial government had attempted with the former government to work on a partnership and decided to go it alone anyways because it was so critical in Ontario, but with this new negotiation and collaboration with the provinces, what does this mean in Ontario in terms of their vision and what they wanted to do, and now having a more national approach?
Well, thank you. I think perhaps the best way to address your comments and question is to give a sense of the consensus that we had in June when we got together with our provincial counterparts. We had clearly a number of provinces that had continued working on a potential Canada Pension Plan enhancement for a number of years. This is not a new discussion. Canadians have recognized for a long time that with the changing nature of work, with increased longevity of all of us, which is positive, and with the lower interest rate environment that we're in right now, that retirement security is more at risk than it has been in previous generations. Ontario, as one of those provinces, put forward an approach to deal with retirement security in Ontario, but they, as the other provinces were very open to a national solution. Their view and the other provinces around the table and our view was that one of the strengths we have in Canada in our retirement system is that it's a national system. It's a system where we have an ability for employers to move people around the country so that they're not dealing with different situation in different provinces, a situation where there's a sense of the common good, which is finding a retirement system that can work for everyone. So it was in that spirit of consensus that we sent out to come to an answer. And Ontario had an approach that was different than what we came up with, but we were able to use their ideas, bring forward the ideas from other provinces. We had very helpful interventions from many provinces to get to an answer that we think is going to be positive for, as you say, the generation of Canadians that's coming next. And that is the generation of Canadians that are less likely to have a workforce pension plan, that are more likely to be living in a lower interest rate environment, that are more likely to have a larger number of jobs, with different retirement situations, those different jobs. So we feel that we've improved the situation for Canadians in the future, and we are confident that the way we've done it, which is a very gradual introduction of the program, starting in 2019, increasing it over a 7-year period, is one that will allow our economy to continue to be strong. So we've got a win-win. It'll be better for people in the long run, and it will allow our economy to be strong in the short and medium term.
Thank you. You're out of time as well. Mr. McColman, and then Mr. Savara.
Well, I'm glad you referred to the name WIN, because let me tell you my Ontario perspective as a small business owner for 25 years, employing about 20 people, that over the business roundtables that we held this summer, this was one of the most significant issues in their mind. And at the Senate committee, what Jack Mintz said is what really is happening now is there's a movement afoot to try to kill off the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan, the ORPP. Also supporting that argument in a kind of a, I suppose, a very different way was the Premier herself, who came out after your meetings and stated unequivocally that she was the person who drove the agenda. She was the one that everyone could thank. She was the one that set the timetable to be a very aggressive timetable in terms of meeting deadlines that even the province of British Columbia said is unrealistic. And so a very different view from a business side has been given. And Minister, do you think that you've done a good job informing Canadians generally about the major impacts this will have? I noticed just something that's come out from the ministry this morning says that this will have a very negative impact on business in the initial stages. Is that correct?
Well, thanks for your question. I think I'd like to start by saying that we had a very positive spirit around the table in June. We came to a conclusion that's historic. We collaborated, provinces, the federal government around the table, to get to a solution that's going to help hundreds of thousands of Canadians to retire in dignity. We know that this is a very important issue for Canadians as they determine how they're going to set up their financial affairs during the course of their life. It's a worry for so many people that they won't have the capability to retire in dignity. And I think that we can be proud of the fact that we have improved the situation of those Canadians in the future.
A recent IPOS poll polled said that 40% of seniors, current seniors, or people who are just about to go into retirement, believe that they are going to be the recipients of some of these benefits. That's the kind of communication disconnect that's happened in this country. It's been portrayed as though these are CPP benefits and everyone's going to be benefiting, not the people who are just starting in the workforce who will be able to accumulate it through their lifetime. And you know, again, I'm going to say that the research, all the research that Ontario did, that all of it suggests that in this very sluggish economy that we have right now, this is not the time to introduce something like this, because it's going to affect businesses. It's going to, small business especially, where people will have to make the decision as to whether they're going to be giving their employees increases or be able to give them increases, and in some cases, even having to let people go because of the increased benefits. I know you say the numbers are modest, but when you compare them to the child benefit program that your government instituted, which you told the country was one of the biggest things that could ever happen, they're half the numbers of what you say are modest increases here to CPP.
Well, again, we are so proud of the fact that we were able to collaborate with provinces to get to an answer that's going to improve people's retirement incomes. We're also very cognizant of the fact that it's important to do this in a way that allows our economy to continue to thrive. And that is exactly why we put in an approach to this program that allows businesses and individuals to adjust over a period of time. I'll remind you that it starts in 2019. And in 2019, the amount that a company will be putting aside for an employee on a monthly basis is $6. We know that that money is going into that employee's savings. We also know for that same employee, it will end up giving them $4,000 more in retirement income over the long run. We believe that this is the responsible thing for us to do. We know that the timing over 9 years is something that will entirely enable individuals and companies to adjust, and the outcome that we'll get is hundreds of thousands of Canadians able to retire in dignity because they have a more secure situation than they had previously.
Thank you both. Mr. Sarbera.
Okay. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Excuse the delay this morning. I tend to like to visit Montreal, but not due to fog, so slight delay there. Minister, first I applaud you for reaching a consensus with the provincial colleagues, with your provincial colleagues, on an agreement to expand the CPP. Well done. Millions of Canadians in the future will look back at this and say this will be a momentous day, including myself for today. A couple of things you've commented on, and I actually share this passion for pensions. I led a pension study for a major rating agency here in Toronto, and did some work on this on the panel for the accounting body here in Canada as well. So I understand your comments about lower interest rates and what that's done to defined benefit plans, and how that's made the present value of those liabilities much higher than in past years when rates go down. And I also understand the wind up or closing of defined benefit plans to either new employees or closing of the plans altogether. So the three pillars that exist in Canada, one of those pillars is not as strong as it once was. An expansion of the CPP makes business sense, makes fundamental sense, and makes sense most importantly for middle-class Canadians and those Canadians at home that their kids will be entering the workforce for future generations. And I tie that back to my children, who at one stage will be entering the workforce, and the nature of work has changed for them, where there'll be much less. And one of the key aspects of the CPP is its portability. But the one aspect I'd really like you to comment on is the gradual implementation of the CPP, and how that will part and parcel not have a negative effect on the economy, on how that will allow Canadians to adjust, and on that, in longer term, will be actually a positive on both employment and long-term GDP growth. And it's that long-term thinking that our government has stated that we will do for Canadians. And this agreement that you've reached, and I applaud you again, is something that is a signatory event and we should be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. We recognize that the perspective that Canadians need to have in order to make confident decisions for their families is a sense of security in the long term. We know that confidence among individuals and among businesses is critically important. For individuals, confidence that they're going to be able to retire in future. For businesses, confident that their employees are going to be able to continue working for them and won't seek other employment because they're concerned about their long-term future. So putting in place a pension plan, an enhancement to the Canada Pension Plan that can make a real difference for individuals over the long term was our goal. And doing that, we recognize, is very much a long-term goal. We're doing something today, something that we can be proud of, because we're really focusing on how we can help the next generation and the generations after that. We're making a long-term decision which goes past any electoral cycle. And we're doing it in a way that, that helps those people that are coming after us, in much the same way that the people in the 1960s who put the Canada Pension Plan into place and who improved the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement did by doing something that over the long term would significantly change elderly poverty. So that's the perspective. Your question about how to put that into place, well, we worked with the provinces, and we spoke to the provinces about their individual financial situation. We worked to make sure that we could put this into place in a way that would not be in any way jeopardizing businesses across the country, because we want to ensure that there's confidence among business owners, large and small, and recognize provincial and national economic challenges. So by starting in 2019 and by doing this over a 7-year period, we know that that allows people the ability to enhance their contribution gradually. and in a way that's entirely manageable, which will allow them to have significantly more savings than when they started and face a retirement that's now going to be much more secure.
Francisco?
Okay.
30 seconds.
That's tough sometimes. Just more of a technical side, I was really happy to see the increase to the working income tax benefit for low-income Canadians working, so their incomes will not be impacted, or the retirement incomes will not be impacted. If you wanted to elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Thanks. One of the things that we wanted to ensure as we put in the new enhancement to the Canada Pension Plan was it would help Canadians across all spectrums of earnings range. People in the lower income earnings range, we wanted to make sure that they didn't put more money into the Canada Pension Plan and not get the benefit that they would get afterwards because their income was too low to benefit from that. So by putting in place an approach to increasing the working income tax benefit, what we do is ensure that lower income Canadians are as well off or better off than they would be before this plan, because we didn't want to have any outcome that would in any way put them in a more difficult situation. For those lower income Canadians that are lower income and then earning more during the course of their life, they will be in a situation where this new enhancement will be positive for them. For those that stay in a low income situation over the long term, the working income tax benefit will make sure that they are not in any way disadvantaged through this change.
Thank you both, Mr. Liepert and then Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to talk numbers a little bit. We've heard a lot of words, but I'd just like to focus on numbers a bit. In the past year, you've certainly been quite vocal about the middle income tax cut, which works out to about $1 a day. And if my numbers are correct, this tax increase to CPP is considerably higher than that. And in fact, if my numbers are correct, if someone earns about $30,000 a year, they would in fact pay about an extra $500 a year in CPP premiums, but would receive no middle income tax reduction. At the same time, and you mentioned about a promise of the government, but there was also a promise in the last election campaign to reduce the small business tax by 1%, if I recall. That was reneged on, and now you've added a small business tax in the way of CPP employer contributions. So I'd just like to get your response. Are my numbers correct? Because if they're not, please correct me, because I want to work from facts, but I haven't seen anything that shows those numbers as being incorrect.
Thank you. Sorry, what are you saying? Thank you for your question. Let me start by saying an enhancement in the Canada Pension Plan is savings. There is nothing about a tax here. This is money that's being put aside into the Canada Pension Plan to enhance people's eventual retirement outcome. That $30,000 a year person that you're talking about, they will have, after this is fully in place, an extra $2,400 per year of retirement income, assuming their earnings stay constant. They will have, on a bi-weekly basis, an after-tax increase, again fully mature, in terms of their contribution to their pension of $8. So those are some numbers for you to keep in your head. $8 on a bi-weekly basis after tax for that $30,000 a year person, and $2,400 annually additionally in terms of the amount of money that they'll receive from the Canada Pension Plan. With respect to the things that we've done this year, I will tell you that we have moved forward on an agenda that's trying to help middle-class Canadians and trying to help those Canadians that are struggling to get by. The reduction in taxes impacts 9 million Canadians, putting them in a better situation. It doesn't impact every Canadian. For some of those lower-income Canadians, especially families, the Canada Child Benefit will make a very material difference. So for that $30,000 a year person, if he or she had one child, they would get $6,400 after tax from the Canada Child Benefit. And I think you can work out how much of a significant benefit that is for that person in that situation. So we recognize that in order to actually make a difference, to bring in what we call inclusive growth, to help middle-class families, it's going to be multiple things. It's going to be helping people in the short term with the tax reduction. It's going to be helping families in the short and medium term with a enhanced Canada Child Benefit. It's going to be helping people in the long term to know that they're going to have the savings that they require in order to eventually be able to retire in dignity. It's important, and along with that, we're going to be focused on how we can make investments to grow the economy so that we can also improve their situation through enhanced work opportunities long term.
So I know you mentioned that you concurred with one of your colleagues' question relative to working with the Ontario government. And certainly in Alberta, all I've heard from the socialist government and the labor unions is advocating for this move, but I haven't heard anyone in small business advocating for this move. So I'd like to know who you're talking to. Specifically, have you met with the CFIB on this issue? Because I haven't found anyone in Alberta who's prepared to support this initiative outside of the ND and the big unions.
We believe that this historic agreement is one that is going to be met with continued appreciation across this country. We've found that Canadians are strongly supportive. We've found that business people are supportive. We can say that the Ontario Chamber of Commerce said that they were encouraged by the Finance Minister's decision to move ahead with national pension reform. We can say that the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association welcomes, quotation, welcomes Canada's Finance Minister's commitment to moving forward with addressing the gaps in retirement savings by Canadians. We can tell you that we are seeing support across the country for what we know is a long-term improvement in Canadians' retirement outcomes, and better yet, done in a gradual way that assures that our economy can continue to be strong.
Last question, Mr. Falconer-Ouellette.
Well, thank you very much, Minister and Deputy Minister, for coming. Just on a short offside, my favorite childhood fable was the grasshopper and the ants, and you know, it's important. It's important. Yeah, I read it to my kids all the time. It's important to think about saving for the future. But when Manitoba signed the agreement, they raised the issue of the death benefit. And I was wondering if you could, funerals are really expensive, and I was wondering if you could describe in a bit more detail if there's any negotiations that have been ongoing about that benefit and if there's a possibility of an increase.
Thank you. So we had a fulsome discussion around the table in June with the provinces about what the best way forward was in enhancing the Canada Pension Plan. I will say that Manitoba was a constructive voice at the table. They were a new government in place only for a very short time period. They said that they needed a little more time around that table in order to make sure that they could consider the impacts. And I was very pleased that not that long after our agreement, they came and said that yes, they were supportive of the Canada Pension Plan enhancement, which was a very positive outcome. They also pointed out that there were a number of things that they thought we should look at. As you know, the approach to managing the Canada Pension Plan is one in which we work together with the provinces. There's a triennial review of the plan, which is coming up this December. They proposed that we look at several improvement possibilities for the plan in order to best meet the needs of Canadians in retirement. And one of those was to look, in fact, at this particular measure. So we agreed that we would do the analysis, which the Finance Department is currently doing, in order to have a discussion about whether that is, in fact, an appropriate thing for us to consider. We will look both at those ideas for Manitoba and any other ideas that come forward, because our ongoing imperative is to ensure that this plan is successful for Canadians. And in that, we mean that it provides the benefits that Canadians need, and that does so in a way that ensures that we maintain a program that's funded for the long term, as it is today, so that we can protect people from retirement challenges. So we look forward to that discussion in December, and we'll see, as we're not doing this on our own, we're doing this in collaboration with the provinces. We'll see where we get to on that particular question.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. I was wondering if you could just describe in a little bit more detail the workers' income tax benefit and the benefits for low-income Canadians, as well as some of the investments that are going to be made for low-income Canadians, and how it's going to be offsetting some of the potential costs of this for an increase in a low-income Canadian.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we intend on increasing the working income tax benefit for the benefit of low-income Canadians. We have not finalized all of the details on exactly how that will work. That is something that Paul Rochon, my deputy, and the Finance Department is working on now. And the intent behind that is to ensure that lower-income Canadians that have a constant low income throughout the course of their careers find themselves in a position where they are no worse off or better off through this CPP enhancement. So that's what we're intending on doing, and I'm confident we'll come to some details that we can release in the not-too-distant future.
Okay, thank you both. Before you depart, Minister, mainly on process, maybe going forward. I think, as you're well aware, this meeting was called as a result of an motion called for by 4 members in a committee meeting. You may not be in a position to answer, but I'm wondering on the process going forward. I've been led to believe that this will not be an order in council, that it will be legislation. And if that's the case, then there would be the opportunity to hold hearings on the matter. What I'm trying to determine is, we have pre-budget consultations that we're doing as a committee. We have this issue before us today, and there may be a request for witnesses and other hearings on this issue. But if we're looking in not too long in the distant future of actually dealing with legislation on this specific issue, then that will be a fairly open and transparent process, I would think. So are we dealing with, will we be dealing with legislation? Do you have an answer on that as yet?
In answer to your question, Mr. Chair, our intent is to introduce legislation. We don't have the exact timing of that yet, but that is our intent, to introduce legislation in this session.
Okay, with that, we will thank you, Minister, and we'll take a 5-minute recess while we wait for officials to come to the table. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy and Mr. Minister. Come to order again, and we're still on the Canada Pension Plan, and thank the Department of Finance officials for coming with us is Mr. Leswick, Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic and Fiscal Policy Branch, Mr. Proves, approves. General Director, Federal Provincial Relations and Social Policy Branch. Purves. Okay, good. I'll get it right eventually, Mr. Purves. Ms. Anderson, General Director, Financial Sector Policy Branch, and Mr. Jovanovic, General Director, Tax Policy Branch. So welcome, folks, and I don't believe you have a presentation. We're going to go straight to questions. Is that my understanding? Okay, Mr. Sabara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see where we start here. A couple of comments, or I guess a couple of questions, and we get some clarification or further explanation would be great. In terms of the projections that we're taking into account and that were used, the modeling, if you guys can give some you folks can give some color on that side there in terms of the long-term impact of the implementation, full implementation of the CPP. I believe the numbers do come out positive at the end, and I just wanted to get some more color of that. As an economist myself, and someone who's used these type of models before, it'd be great to get just a little bit of color around that.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So in the department, we use general equilibrium modeling techniques. So I guess in short, it fully kind of characterizes the relationships between firms and households in the economy. So firms from kind of an input and output perspective, so capital, labor, material inputs, and households from a income and consumption perspective. So looking at this, the CPP enhancement, it's what's the behavior of firms as they respond to higher contributions. Likewise, what's the behavior of households as they respond to wage adjustments. So I guess in short, from a GDP perspective, in the short term, as we detailed in the backgrounder, there'd be a very modest short-term impact in years 0 through 12. So from a GDP perspective, in the order of magnitude of 0.05%, which is, just in terms of just raw nominal values, is about $1 billion on a $2.4 trillion economy. And those impacts would dissipate through to 2031, when effectively you have those negative impacts turn positive. And 2031, go forward, you would have effectively kind of the coming online of the various positive impacts. And to define those would be the consumption of now higher retirement income earning individuals, as well as increased economy-wide savings feeding through to lower interest rates and increased investment. So that's kind of the GDP modeling in a nutshell. From an employment perspective, it's pretty much the same thing as well. That these short-term impacts would dissipate over time, and then they would be overwhelmed by the more positive long-term implications after that first 12-year period.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Leswick. Just going to on the 2-year, I want to call it a top-up period, but after the first 5 years of the gradual implementation takes place, there's a 2-year top-up period. And I just wanted to say, just in terms of the mechanics, the contributions of those, and correct me if I'm wrong, yes, can you get some granularity on terms of the tax deductibility for the new employer CPP contributions in terms of the top-up? I believe so there's some information on there.
So I'm sorry if I'm not answering correctly. I'm not 100% sure to have completely understood the question, but is it with respect to the tax treatment of the employer's contribution of the new enhanced CPP?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And so that will be deductible the same way that the current contribution are deductible.
And also there's the aspect of the higher CPP contributions if the employer reduces on the RPP side, that'll be no impact, and I think that's the explanation I was looking at.
Yes, I mean it is possible for employers as well as individuals through their RRSP to, if you will, substitute. So if they're already at the point where they believe that their level of savings is adequate, they can decide to contribute less, for instance, to their RSP or through the employer through the pension plan, which was also a key reason why the additional CPP contributions for the employees are made deductible.
Okay. And I just wanted to, final follow-up, I take it. And I think in terms of the actuarial analysis, my understanding the CPP is actuarially sound for the next 75 years from the last review.
That's correct. So for the core CPP, the last actuarial review was conducted, the 26th review was conducted in 2012, and the contribution rate of 9.9% was found to be sustainable for the next 70 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That was 70 years, 70. 70.
70.
Yes.
Thank
you, Ms. Raitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for being here. I have some questions regarding the actual legislation around the Canada Pension Plan, so I'm going to be quoting from that. You guys have somebody there who can help me with process? Because I bring it up because there's actually a process that's been in place for the last 20 years, which is noted in the annual report of the Canada Pension Plan, which is the most recent one we have, and it was actually tabled by Minister Morneau. And what it says in here, and it's very specific because it sets out for Canadians what the process is to ensure financial sustainability of CPP, which is the question that you were just asked. And it says very clearly that every 3 years that the ministers, federal and provincial, meet in order to make recommendations as to whether benefits and/or contribution rates should be changed. They base it on a number of factors, including something called the Actuarial Report on the Canada Pension Plan, which is prepared every 3 years. Now, my understanding from the process, if you look at the section on the financial review, is that once every 3 years after 1997, everybody shall review the financial state of the Canada Pension Plan, and then there's a process about how you make any changes. So my question is, was this process followed this time for these changes?
Thank you for the question. Let me answer it in two parts. The first part has to do with the actuarial report or review, and you are correct that there's a regular process for reviewing the actuarial soundness of the CPP. So the last one, as I said to the member, was done in 2012, and so the next one, the 27th report, we can expect sometime this fall to be completed. Now the process is that it's tabled with it's provided by the Office of the Chief Actuary, so the Chief Actuary himself is provided to the Minister of Finance, and then the Minister of Finance then has a certain time frame within 5 business days to table within Parliament. Now that's distinct from any process for dealing with an enhancement to CPP, which I think is the second part of your question. An enhancement to CPP, there are rules in the legislation about how to follow an enhancement, and so there's guidelines saying that the CPP enhancement has to be done on a fully funded basis. And then there's guidelines in terms of changes to legislation, and then what the responsibilities of provinces are with respect to OICs. So that, on the process basis, that's how it's done.
Okay, so I understand that, and we're talking about the same part of the Act. But my understanding is that there has to be a formal response in the form of a triennial review. Has that happened?
So once the 27th actuarial report will be tabled.
No, I mean for the last one, because we're still in the open period for the last one. Is this the process?
So the last triennial review was completed in, I believe, 2015. Yes.
Okay.
And so just to be clear, the tabling of the actuarial report is what triggers the launching of the next triennial review.
And what was the outcome of the last triennial review?
Well, the main finding was, of course, the sustainability of the plan, and the provinces, along with territories and the federal level, get together and they decide what are the items they'd like to review for that period. And so for that period, there were not many items that were
So
identified.
this was concluded in 2015, as you said, and somewhere in the last 10 months, not even 10 months, 9 months, something has fundamentally changed from what the provinces and the federal government had concluded to now, so that we have these very large changes to the Canada Pension Plan. And that's why we're not going to be waiting for the next actuarial report and instead of going through the triennial process?
Well, typically the triennial review does review different aspects of the plan. They look at the retirement benefits, they look at secondary and ancillary benefits and all its components. And the view was that the calibration of the CPP, core CPP, was on a sustainable basis and that there was no decision to make changes at that time.
Okay, last question then. In your report...
Ms. Raitt, you're over time.
Oh, this was a good one though, Chair.
I know, but that's too bad. You should have asked it earlier. But I am going to fit in a question, if I can throw it in here.
Oh, now you're taking my time,
No,
I see.
your time's done. On the CPP enhancement side, which was part of your question, what is the process of that? I think Ms. Raitt was leaning towards if that was something that should have been done later than as a result of that report. What is the process for CPP enhancement? Is there any?
It's simply in the Act. There's some rules pertaining to if you're going to enhance the CPP, that it has to be on a fully funded basis, and on a process basis, there would naturally be changes to legislation, which the Minister highlighted, and then upon royal assent of that legislation, then provinces would provide, you would need 7 out of 10, representing 2/3 of the population, would come forward with their orders in council, and then a final step is the federal order in council.
Thank you very much. Mr. Duval, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you coming here. So I understand that the new program will be fully phased in by 2025. And so far, with the vague information that has been released, it would appear that 2025, a person would have to contribute to the new levels for 40 years in order to be eligible for the full CPP enhancement. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there is a period, there's a 2-year notification period between now and 2019.
Right.
Until 2025, that's a 7-year gradual implementation. At that point, then it's fully phased in. And then 40 years, because it's effectively, it's a 40-year accrual.
Okay, so
40 years beyond that is when you would have the
maximum
benefit.
So that person, that would be 49 years from now. So the first person that would be eligible for the full CP enhancement is now 16 years old. Would be 16 years old as of today.
Absolutely. It has to do with the youth, young workers for today, who are going to be in need of retirement benefits coming forward. Now, having said that, anyone who is of working age or is working from 2019 onwards, if they contribute to this enhancement, they will get contribution. They will generate retirement benefits. But your specific question is about the maximum, and that is correct. It would take 40 years to get to the maximum.
Okay, so my question is, what benefits would a person who is currently 15 years old receive under the new enhancement plan, plus, or versus a person who is 35 versus a person who is 55 years of age?
Well, a lot of it has to do with your income. So depending on your income, it'll determine what your contribution, what your biweekly contributions are. So I'll use an example. If someone is earning, say, $40,000 a year, and they've contributed for a full 40 years, then the incremental benefit to that person at retirement, the incremental benefit, what's on top of their core CPP, so just for the CPP enhancement, will be $3,200.
I think what I'm asking, though, is I'm trying to get, as of now, a person that is 55 or a person that is 50 would not be receiving anything under this new enhancement.
Well, someone who's 50, if they pay in for 10 years, they would still have the full benefit for the CPP. They would have the number of years they contributed to the CPP enhancement as well. And as the minister outlined, there's a whole number of measures that have been taken to support new retirees or seniors by the government on the GIS top-up, depending on their family situation, if they have children, student assistance, Canada Child Benefit, and so forth.
So what proposals has your department prepared for the minister for reversing the increased levels of poverty among seniors while Canadians wait for these enhancements to take effect?
Well, I would say that if you look at Budget 2016, there's been a number of measures that have been taken to support seniors. One is the GIS top-up, which amounts to $947 per year for single, unattached seniors that are in qualifying for that certain income range. There's also the OAS as well, bringing the age of eligibility down from 67 to 65. And as the minister said, there's strong benefits that come with that as well.
Very much. We'll have to move on to Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you for being here today. Obviously, we're going to create a considerable reserve of capital, and that will be paid through investment funds to the Canada Pension Plan. Have you calculated the additional amount of capital that will be managed, or rather received and managed by the Canada Pension Investment Fund?
Yes, we have. So over time, it will increase as the contributions increase, and we expect that by 2045, that the amounts that are in the enhancement will be equivalent to what is in the current CPP investment account. So that at that stage, they will both surpass $1 trillion for a combined asset base of $2 trillion.
So has there been discussions with CPPIB with respect to governance of the organization, given the considerable increase in assets under management, in investment strategies, or other matters with respect to the management of this obviously massive sum of money?
Oh, sorry. That's a very good question. They will be the managers of the new funds that will be accruing, and certainly the investment policies will be key, and they will need to be tailored to the fully funded status of the plan and the objectives of it. So once the funds start to flow to the organization, the board will be entrusted in their fiduciary responsibility with a fully funded plan to set up an appropriate investment policy. And in the context of the upcoming triennial review with our federal provincial partners, we will be looking at these issues to make sure that they are prudently managed.
So there will be a review of governance measures or considerations around the governance of CPPIB that may come into play with, again, this pretty massive increase in funds under management?
Well, I think we've learned, I mean, particularly through the financial crisis, that you can never be complacent with corporate governance. So this is something we take very seriously, and we will continue to look at it to make sure it's fine-tuned to do the job it needs to do.
Could you describe right now, just in terms of the interaction between the department and CPP with respect to CPPIB, rather, with respect to these reforms?
Well, these reforms, they're very much in terms of the objectives of the government. The CPPIB is an arm's-length agency set up to manage investment funds. So what we've done here and the policy we put into place is separate and distinct from the investment of those funds. So going forward, that will be a key issue that we will need to take up with them about how to best to manage them.
Could you just, for people's benefit, situate $1 trillion pension investment management organization, situate that in world terms and in global terms? How big would that make the CPPIB, for example?
Well, I can comment on where they currently are. They're currently, in terms of public pension plans, they're about seventh in the world among other plans.
So this will not negatively affect that standing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. We'll have a chance, I know, to hear from CPPIB, or I assume we will, in the context, Mr. Chairman, of reviewing the legislation that the minister is going to be bringing forward. And I know we've asked as well that CPPIB more generally and their new president come before us to introduce himself. So we look forward to that discussion then. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. McKinnon. Mr. McCullum.
Thank you, Chair.
5 minutes.
I'm going to read a quote that just of something I was reviewing this morning, and it's from the dated August 30th, 2016, from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. It's kind of the preamble to the question of specifics that I want to ask you. And it's Section 3 of their pre-budget submission that says, increases to the cost of doing business in Canada, including the proposed increases in CPP employer contributions, payroll taxes, will negatively impact Canadian automotive competitiveness with other jurisdictions where costs are lower. Certainty and predictability are key factors when global investment decisions are made. As part of the announced Canada Pension Plan enhancement, it is important that the government recognize the fact that auto manufacturing companies already provide high-quality private pension plans to their workers. If CPP premiums are increased as proposed, this will result in significant increases to auto industry payroll expenses at a time when there is already competitiveness challenges for the industry in Canada versus other competing jurisdictions. So that leads into my question, which that I'll ask you as government officials. Have you done a full analysis of the impact of premium hikes on such things as business competitiveness, household income, jobs, GDP, before this legislation, or will you be doing those and modeling it, as you say, in current economic circumstances before legislation is placed before the Commons?
I don't think Mr. McCullum is asking for the policy decision, which is a government matter. This is related. This question is related to what officials may be able to answer without getting into the government decision itself.
No, thank you for the question, and I want to assure the committee that we did do our due diligence in trying to model the impacts. And as I described to the other member, I mean, we do this from an economy-wide, enterprise-wide perspective, both in trying to understand the behavior of firms, not sector-specific, as your quote alludes to, but also the behavior of households as well as they respond to this new policy change. And I want to say that the results of our modeling is effectively congruent with those of the Conference Board and other people who are doing this type of analysis. And in trying to be plainly stated, acknowledging that there will be this short-term impact between years 0 through 12, but that it would be a very modest short-term impact and an impact that would be mitigated by this long phase-in period to allow firms the opportunity to adjust wages, profits, prices to be able to adjust to this the new CPP enhancement. And that ultimately that the short-term impact would be quite modest, like I stated, and probably the most easily understood, just raw nominal value, which is about $1 billion on a $2.4 trillion economy. So not to dismiss it, but that those negative impacts would then dissipate after year 12, and that the economy, from like kind of a total output perspective, would start to reap the benefits through increased consumption as a result of larger pre-retire or post-retirement incomes. The efficiency of the CPP vehicle, so people substituting their savings into a portable, efficient, low management fee plan. And I could go on, but this is what our models tell us, and then, like I said, our models are comparable to others who are scrutinizing this.
I notice, in presenting this information to us today, you've used the word modest. Please define modest to me in economic terms.
Well, again, I just go, and again, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but we're talking about $1 billion short-term output impact on a $2.4 trillion economy. You put a 0.05 impact on output in percentage terms against the sum total of budget 16 measures, which contributed to 0.5% of GDP growth. So just in comparative terms and relative terms, it's quite small.
Yeah, it's an interesting term for you to use, actually, because it leads one to think that instead of complete objectivity, especially from people who are in business, such as the vehicle manufacturers here in Canada and other small business people, where they see what I would say is a significant impact. The information we have from CFIB and others who represent a broad number of businesses across the country, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce as well. I know Ontario came out because they didn't want the ORPP and Kathleen Wynne's plan. But that said, I'm a little bit surprised at the use of the word modest, because some people's modest is other people's significant impact, depending on the scale of operations you have and such. So can I ask you this question? Ontario was going down the road of implementing a plan. It had spent about $70 million in terms of its government taxation spending in Ontario taxpayers' money, towards setting this plan up. I won't talk about the other aspects of tearing it down, which cost more money than you can believe. But again, maybe it's modest in some people's minds. But did you use any of the information and the research that Ontario did to set up the ORPP in coming to any of your modeling or your projections?
It's difficult for me to answer. I mean, we work collaboratively with the provinces throughout this process. I can't say specifically whether we would have or would not have used any information, but so let me go with no. This is while it was a collaborative process, this was analysis that was done internal to the Department of Finance Canada, and it's our own general equilibrium models and economic models which rendered the results that I spoke to earlier.
O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards, following up on that line of questioning, does your modeling take into account the savings of businesses for other government programs or tax reductions for small businesses, for example, and EI reductions from Budget 2016, or is it purely the model of this program?
May I just consult with the colleague behind me so I can accurately answer the question? Thank you. It's just a model for, it's just a model specific to this measure. It doesn't take into the consideration the broader suite of other programs that might be more dynamic.
Thank you. So in some instances, it could be offset altogether by some of the other programs introduced by the government. And that's something I don't expect you to answer. It's just throwing it out there in terms of the model doesn't include some of the savings that this government has offered. In regards to, I want to talk about some of the numbers of why we're here, why we're looking to the future. What has the department found in terms of those actual numbers of people not saving for retirement? So do you have those statistics, you know, in terms of the age range and how many Canadians are, you know, is the department worried about in terms of retirement savings? What are those statistics?
If I understand the question clearly, I mean, as we laid out in the background, and as the minister spoke to, you know, based on our analysis, and just taking a step back, our analysis looks at kind of the characterization of Canadian households and their kind of asset liability profile through the survey of financial security. And you take that financial profile and then you start to effectively evaluate what an individual household may have in terms of income sources post-retirement. So as the minister said, you know, our three pillars of retirement income, OAS, CPP, private savings, either sponsored through RSPs or TFSAs, and then any other equities, whether it's mutual funds, stocks, or equity that they would have in their household. And then starting to kind of annuitize this balance sheet, you know, positioned against I guess, life expectancy of the average Canadian family and individual. Our assessment told us that there was, you know, 25% of individuals that are at risk of undersaving, calibrated against a 60% post-retirement income replacement rate. Now that varies. You know, if you know, there's commentators believe that you need a lower income replacement rate, then obviously the risk of undersaving goes down. But there's also equal amount of people and academics who think you may need a higher replacement rate depending on your income or household profile, and then the risk of undersaving goes up. So in that 60% replacement rate, which is, you know, let's say the majority of literature out there, which says that's, you know, a reasonable replacement rate to replace post-retirement or pre-retirement consumption, we believe there's 24% of Canadian households that are at risk of undersaving.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sure.
Mr. Connell?
I guess my quick question is, why was the choice made for 7 years in terms of the phase out? Why 7? Why not sooner? Why not a little longer?
Well, I think that, thank you for the question. I think that when you look at its entirety, we talk about 7 years, but the reality is that there's a 2-year notification plus 7-year gradual phase-in. So we're 2016 right now, 2025 is when it's going to be fully phased in, so that's close to a decade. And I think overall, and without speaking for the minister, who of course with his colleagues agreed to this in June, that something in that order of magnitude was viewed as something that would allow Canadian businesses as well as individuals to prepare for an increase in cost. And so having that gradual phase-in was something that was viewed to be allowing for industry, but individuals to be able to absorb this, the modest contribution increases.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I turn to you, Ron, I don't want to run out of time, but just to mention to committee members that we need to, Thursday will be the deadline for recommendations for the CRA report we're working on tax avoidance and evasion. We've got the, we're dealing with that report next week, I believe.
Monday, Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday next week, and so if committee members have any recommendations to get them in, so that we can deal with them effectively next week, we should have them by Thursday. That's okay? Mr. Liepard.
A couple of quick questions, mainly for my own information. When someone retires, CPP, especially if CPP is their only retirement, there are other programs for retirees. Can you just sort of elaborate on what those are and what they would pay as a maximum amount on a monthly basis?
Sure. You want me to? Thank you for the question. So that's true that there's many pillars. There's 3 pillars on retirement. So in terms of the CPP, with the maximum, which is called the YMP, the yearly maximum pensionable earnings, the maximum amount to be paid would be $13,100. I think the minister mentioned that already. Now that doesn't include any enhancement that would come forward. That's
right.
Just the core. Now on top of that, it really dependent on it depends on your income. So there's an income tested program called OAS.
Right. Let's assume there is no additional income. What's the maximum OAS?
So the maximum OAS would be $6,880.
So about 50% of what the CPP is then.
And then for GIS, you're looking at about $10,000 on top of that.
So those 2 subsidy programs today effectively are higher than the CPP benefit, is that right?
Well,
at max.
This is assuming someone that does not earn anything, in no working income in retirement. Yeah.
So that this change could, and those are all government-funded programs. Those aren't employer-employee. They're all government. They're effectively government subsidized.
They're government programs.
Right. Yes. That allows the government at some point in time, as these numbers start to come, to potentially bring that down. Is that a fair assessment? Is it that some of that gap would be filled by enhanced CPP?
Yeah, so effectively there could be a recovery tax rate as more income is generated that specifically on the GIS portion that the amounts could come down, yes.
So I wanted to move to, as a department, when you, part of your responsibility, I presume, is to ensure that the minister has the broad range of information to help make decisions on. I asked the minister who he had consulted with on this issue, and I frankly didn't get an answer, so I have to conclude no one. Does the department do sort of what I would call stakeholder kinds of input before a major decision like this is embarked on? Would you have sort of met, as an example, with the Federation of Independent Business, with labor unions, with whatever? Do those kind of meetings take place?
Well, at the official level, depending on the policy file, we have numerous discussions with all sorts of interested parties. You know, there's a CPP committee involving the provincial officials, which we're in regular contact with, and there are regular engagements that happen on a whole host of different policy issues with stakeholders. You know, there's budget consultations that continue to go on, so it's a normal feature of any department to do that.
And what would sort of be the consensus that you might have come to conclude after those meetings?
Well, I think you know, it depends on a policy by policy basis.
On this policy specifically? Well,
I think, you know, on this policy specifically, you know, the outcome in June is a reflection of the, as the minister said, I think the engagements that the minister at the finance minister level that they've had together, I can't speak to any private engagements that they've had or outreach.
Well, he
that they've
seemed to
had
indicate
on
he
issues.
didn't have any. So I'm asking you if, as a department that's charged with giving him advice on policy decisions, and I'm not interested in your discussions with other finance departments across the country. I'm more interested in, what the business community, who's eventually going to have to pay for this, is whether those kinds of discussions took place specifically on this issue.
Well, CP.
Mr. Purvis, Mr. Champagne was, maybe he could shed some light on the political side of this equation rather than putting you on the spot on the consultations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for putting me on the spot then. No, but I think the minister was clear when he said he did consult widely on this issue. He had a number of town halls even this summer, I think he mentioned, where he consulted, and that's part of our role. We consult on an ongoing basis about all policies. As you know, we did that, and as the officials said on a pre-budget consultation, we consult with constituents, we consult with business throughout the summer, and I think the minister was very clear, so to suggest otherwise is not in line with the record.
Mr. Ouellette.
Mr. Chair, I was just looking at some of the rates. We heard a question about the rates and how competitive Canada is. I was just looking at the OECD report from 2013, and in fact, actually, Canada has some of the lowest contribution rates in the world. If you look at Austria, it's around 22.8% in 2012. Estonia, 22.8% as well. France, 16.7%. Really, even the United States actually has a contribution rate in 2012 of 10.4%, and Mexico is really our only competitor in North America, which actually has no contribution rate, and essentially no pension plan and protection for their workers. So I was wondering what efforts you had gone into looking at some of the different rates compared to other world markets, whether it's Singapore, Hong Kong, or Taiwan, and how it relates to Canada and what we're doing.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the question. Overall, I'd say that, leading up to this, there's been a lot of looking at different benchmarks, different retirement systems in different systems. The minister had highlighted that Canada has a world-class system, and I think that's recognized at the OECD. There are considerable challenges facing young workers. If you look at the demographics, for instance, young workers are going to be working, living longer. That market returns is a question of whether market returns will effectively be at the same level that they were in the past. In addition to that, if you look at the evolution of defined benefit plans in many jurisdictions, you'll see that defined benefit plans are moving away from the private space, and many of the jurisdictions that you noted actually we're looking at defined contribution plans. So this enhancement a lot of it is about trying to bolster the portion of a defined benefit plan that is within a Canadian retiree's portfolio.
But we're also moving away from, for instance, the pay-as-you-go to more of a long-term model here.
That's right, because if you look, there's two reasons for that. One is, if you look at the enhancement, any enhancement is supposed to be done on a fully funded basis. So it's more about income replacement than anything else. So the longer that you contribute to that plan, the higher your benefit, your retirement benefit will be. And so those principles are very much akin to what you would see in a registered pension plan in the private sector as well.
I was just wondering, another question, about the workers' income tax benefit. I was wondering if you could give me the number of Canadians who will actually benefit from that or potentially benefit.
Well, there is currently about 1.5 million individuals benefiting from the working income tax benefit. Many of those same individuals will benefit from the expansion. So I don't have a precise number as to how many more, if there are more, but I think that by and large it's going to be by and large the same individuals, I would say.
And I have just one final question, Mr. Chair. We have a number of federal employees, I think around 260,000, 250,000, depending on the number. I was wondering what the actual cost to the Treasury would be in the increase of the CPP, if you would have that number.
You mean just for the federal employees?
Yes.
I don't have that number, but we can have an estimation.
Okay.
Thank you. So that information can be sent to the clerk. Mr. Duval, last questions.
Thank you. And there's word out there that some of the provinces have had concerns, and they've expressed concerns about the new plan and what's the effect it's going to have on low-income people. Some provinces are complaining about businesses. Has there been any unresolved issues with the provincial governments and the federal government that must address before implementing the proposed changes to the CPP? And if so, how are they going to go about doing that?
No, thank you for the question. In June, there were 8 signatories, of course, to the CPP enhancement. Manitoba joined as well, so that brings it to 9. And then Quebec gave its support to the enhancement, although it's going to be doing its own consultations. Since then, there's been no issues to report, certainly. There have been items that have been identified by provinces as being important to look at as part of the triennial review that I had discussed earlier. Manitoba had identified some issues that will be tabled, and certainly there will be other provinces that will want to look at these issues as well. But these are the triennial review, and these issues have much more to do about CPP in general. And the fact is that this plan would not be in place until starting in 2019. So, we continue to have regular dialogue with our colleagues. Again, at the officials level, there's a CPP committee, and at the political level as well, there's ongoing discussions with colleagues on.
So there's no conditions on any of the provinces that must be met prior to implementing this?
Well, as I said, there's, in terms of a process, there is a process for the CPP enhancement to be put in place, which is clearly laid out in the CPP Act. So legislation would be tabled, and then that would be followed by provincial OICs, and then a federal OIC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That we will call it a day. Thank you, Ms. Anderson and gentlemen, for your for coming before the committee to answer questions. Just to remind members as well that are on the subcommittee, there is a meeting this afternoon at 3:30, and pre-budget consultations tomorrow at 3:30. That should keep everybody happy. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.